Okay, introduction to arrays and loops. The idea is that if you want to create a whole bunch of one thing, in this case bones, it's easier, it's more succinct, it's better if these different things are stored within one single variable that's called an array. And an array allows you to list a bunch of different values or objects in one variable. So I recommend going back to this javascript.info website, and right now it's on class basic syntax. Let's just search for array. There's a search field up here you can't see, but I'm just going to search for array and arrays. Okay, so these are the basic syntax for array. Ignore this. This is more complicated. Okay, so let fruits is in the array, and it's storing a bunch of these different fruit types separated by commas. Wonderful. Each of these different things, the different fruit types, can be accessed by citing the name of this array variable followed by brackets with numbers. And what these numbers refer to is the position of these fruits in the array. And computers start counting at 0. So this apple is in 0 position. These orange is in position 1, and the plum is in position 2. Oops, my phone is ringing, and it's a dog bark. Okay, I have dog-themed life. How is Nala? Oh, you can kind of, Nala. Hi, Nala. Chillin'. Okay, back to arrays. So look over the syntax. We'll get more into it next week. Now let's just see how an array would work. So instead of having bone 1, bone 2, bone 3, let's say let bones, plural, and let's just initialize this as an empty array. So remember, this bracket is the array syntax right here, comma separated values and brackets, and you can initialize it just with an empty bracket. So now bones is an array with has nothing in it. So we could assign these different places in the array. So instead of bone 1, 2, 3, 4, and let's just get rid of these now. We're not going to use them anymore. Instead of bones 1, 2, 3, 4, this is going to be bone 0. We're not going to use, it's not 1 anymore because computers start counting up at 0. And honestly, I should have had these variables start with 0 too, just to keep things in computer speak. And so now they're going to be bone 1, bone 2, and bone 3. And then down here, instead of bone 1, 2, 3, 4 display, we're going to have this do the same thing. And I'm just using multi-line cursor, super power, bones. I'm changing it from bone to bones because now it's in the array. And I'm going to make it bone 0, bone 1, bone 2, oops, one spot, bone 2, and bone 3. And let's run this and see if it does the same thing. Ooh, error, bone is not defined, sketch, line 11. Ah, this is not bone, but now this is bones because these are accessing the array, which is bones. Run this. Excuse me. Great, same thing. So this hasn't really reduced many lines of code. I mean, instead of having all the different names up here, variable names up here, we have one, but still we have all these different individual lines accessing the array. And by the way, if you want to see what the array looks like, you can console.log bones. Let's just run this. Now we see that there are 4 bone objects, bone, 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 and each of them has their own exposition, rotation, and size. Okay, highlighting the whole line up here is Command L. I'm going to delete that. Okay, so we can initialize these using a loop. Love it. So we're going to use a for loop, which allows us to loop a specific amount of time. So we're going to say for let I equal 0. What's going on here? Okay, I is our little iterator. It's a counter. So let I equal 0 as long as I is less than, you can say less than or equal to 3, because we have 0, 1, 2, 3. So as long as it's 0, 1, 2, or 3, as long as it's this, then we're going to increase I by 1, I plus plus. So there's that syntax right there. And you'll get used to this for loop syntax, especially as we do more and more of it next week. So that's followed by curly brackets. Now they're closed up. So for each time I starts with 0 and then increases by 1, let's create a bone. Now notice, since I starts at 0 and increases by 1, we can just replace these numbers in this array by I. So now I'm going to copy this line and put it right here and change that from 0 to this iterator variable I. And now I'm going to get rid of all this code. Ooh, except, wait a minute. Each of these bones have very specific widths and heights, and geez, this is just going to be kind of funny, because if I want this specific width and height and rotation, then I can't use it in this loop. But what I can do is do more things with this I iterator. So I could have it, instead of width times 0.8, I could say width times 0.2 times I. Okay, let's try it. Height times 0.8. Instead of making it like that, I could say this is height times 0.2 times I, and the rotation here, because I is 0, 1, 2, 3, this can be I times 3, and the scale can be, I don't know, I times 0.32. Okay, so what will happen here? I'm just going to comment out these lines. Okay, so now we have different bones, and they're falling. They're looking pretty neat in how they're falling like that. And there should be 4, but we're only seeing 3. Wonder if one of them's getting drawn off the screen. Oh, and they're not changing heights, because here I wrote 1, and this should be I. So let's see that. Okay, now they're different heights. They're a little too, I don't know, perfect. And also, we're not seeing one of them because the scale is 0, because the first loop, 0, I is 0, so there's no scale. So we might say I times 0.3. Maybe we can say 0.5 plus I times 0.3. Run that. Okay, now there's 4. But maybe what we want is, instead of using the I iterator, let's generate these values with the random function. So instead of doing this kind of funny counting with the iterator, which is very, very useful, not to say that it's not useful, just in this context, why don't we initialize them with random values? So instead of having the width 0.2 times I, let's see, width times, boop, boop, doop. Why don't we make it random? So this is going to pull a random value from 0, 0.0 to 1.0. I'm not sure if we need that second decimal, but let's see what this works. Okay. No. They are making all those heights 1. Hopefully, this is supposed to create something in between 0.0 and 1.0 in different decimal points, but that does not look right. What if we just go Random 0 to 1 without the decimals, still the same. Random 1, no, still the same. Okay, so let's go to the P5 documentation for random. And random will return a random number from 0, but not to 1. It's not telling us about decimals, but that's a random number. So maybe it just will return integers, straight numbers. So instead of it having, and it takes 1 to 2, so you can start with the bottom range, like 1 to 10. So this will generate random things between 1 and 10. If you just have 1, it'll generate random from 0 to 10, or what default 0, but random 1 to 10. And so why don't we just divide that, like 1 to 10, 1 to 10, divide that by 10. That'll give us decimal points, and then multiply that by the height, or actually the width in this case, because this is the x position. And then there we go. Now we got our random things. And if you want to keep it consistent, we can just say times width times 0.1, because we've been writing things as decimals like this. And there we go. Now they're random x values. So we can do the same thing for this height. I'm just going to change width to height. And this is just, because if we resize our canvas, it should scale up with it. So let's see if I make the canvas be small, and all the scale stays the same. So that's why we've been doing this kind of laborious width and height. But, there's other ways to adjust for that are probably easier in the end than typing this out over and over and over. But, for this demo, it's what I did. Sorry if it was a lot of typing. And then let's see, what else we have here is the rotation, I times 3. Let's just say this rotation can start at random 360, and the size can be random 10. So that'll be 1 to 10. Ooh, which is going to be huge. Let's look at this. Let's see. Whoa, huge. Okay, random 10 times maybe 1.5. So this will do random from 0 to 1.5. Oops, not 1.5. 0.15. Is that right? Yeah, they're kind of small now. Kind of small. So random 10, we want it to be, this should be math. Well, for now, let's just make it 0.3. Oof, big. Okay, 0.2. I think that 0.15 was a good sweet spot. Oh, maybe I just didn't run it fresh again last time. Okay, so now we're initializing this bones array, filling it with 4 different bones, each of which are given random x positions, random y positions, random rotations, and random sizes. So if you wanted to create more of these, you could increase this iterator here. So let's say instead of having it go up to 3, I go up to 5 here. Now this isn't going to work. I'll show you why, but we did this. Okay, but it's still only displaying 4 of them, even though when we console.log this array to see what's inside it, console.log bones, we console.log it and we see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There are 6 bones, which is how many we created, but we're only seeing 4. I'm going to delete this because we don't need it anymore. We're only seeing 4 because down here we're just displaying those 4. We're not accessing the extra ones in the array. So in order to do that, you can use a loop whenever you move or display them too. So cool. When you do this loop, though, so we're doing a for loop, so for I, this is a little iterator, I equals 0, like getting rid of this. Okay, so up here I did it and I had a space in between all these different equal signs, and this looks a little more concise without the space, but for consistency, I'm just going to do it this way. So it starts at 0, and how long do you want it to loop for? Well, up here we initialize it with a hard number because we want just so many in the array, but say we change this and we make it 8 or 9, and we don't also want to change it down here. What you can do is have it loop from I starts at 0 to I is less than bones dot length. So this will return the length of the array. So maybe before we do that, let's just check. If we go console.log bones.length, what does it say? Drum roll, 6. So, oh, and I put that in the draw loop, so we're just seeing it over and over again. I'm just going to move that right into setup here because I don't want to have to see that. Oops, I don't want to see that a million times. I'm taking this console.log from down there. Okay. Putting it right there. Okay, so now we see our array 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It has 6 different things, and the bones.length is 6 indeed. So when we're drawing this for loop, for I equals 0, I is less than or equal to 6. I plus plus, and then this is followed by curly brackets. So this is going to run 6 times. Is it going to run 6 times? I starts at 0. I goes up 1. Why don't we just console.log I? Let's see how many times it's actually looping. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's looping 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that is indeed 6 times, starting up, counting at 0. Now, up here we have it say less than or equal to 5. I is starting at 0. And here we just say I is less than bones length. So this is not less than or equal to because we want it to get up to 5. When it hits 6, the loop breaks. If we had it be less than or equal to, we would need to set this to bones.length minus 1. So you might see that sometimes when things are iterating through arrays, because if you have that equal sign, it's going to count that last number. But for now, I is less than bones.length, I plus plus, and then all we need to put down here is bones I display, and then bones I move. And now we don't need any of this code. Okay, will this work? Running it. Yes. Ooh, there's that little tiny one there. Ooh, we're getting some tiny, 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 tiny ones. Okay, so let's go back to our scale right here, random 10 times 0.15. Ooh, so maybe we want that to be a little bigger. I guess it's just random, so sometimes they're huge. I mean, there's different ways we could do this. Okay, well, we could make it, instead of going up to 10, you could make this random 8. You play with your numbers. You make it what you want to do. Some of those little ones are a little too tiny for me. So, okay, you get the idea. And now, instead of all those different lines of code, we just have the bones array, this for loop right here. And I know this is a little funny to read since the line wraps around, but if this was smaller, you can see that that's just one line of code. Okay, so we just have this bones initialized as an array, and then they're all instantiated, all these different objects in a loop, and then they're also all displayed in this loop here. And so if we wanted a lot more bones, we could make this 10. Now there are 10 bones. Ooh, there's a lot of them. You could also create, ooh, that's a lot. You could also create different, I'll make them smaller again, give them different speeds, give them random speeds. That might make it look more dynamic. The speeds could relate to the size. You could get a cool parallax effect. I'm going to make there be 100 bones. Wow! Wild! That dog is so happy. And just for the hell of it, I'm going to move these bones on top of the dog so it looks like the dog is just being buried in bones. Do you see this, Nala? Lovely. And there you go.